Recording in progress. Okay. I think there's a couple of new people here, so just real quick, I don't know if you read the body on the landing page or not, but the conceit of this meetup is it's 1882, and you don't know anything about what Nietzsche is heading toward or what other philosophers later thought of any of his work. You can refer to anybody that preceded him. You can also refer to biographical information. But otherwise, the idea is to approach these aphorisms with your own mind as much as possible. And because I'm pretty convinced that we can all do this on our own. So that's what we're up to here. So we're up to 46, I think, right? Yeah. Which is, and it's this is a 1 hour session a day, and then every other week it's an hour and a half. So that alternates 1 hour 1 week, hour and a half the next week.
Lindsay, are you skipping next week? Because I saw
Next
on the
week,
side, yeah.
next
The
week will be
sign-
an and a half, hour and a half.
Oh, okay, because when you go to look at the dates for the upcoming ones, it looks like one's missing.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes. No, it might be. Maybe I'm wrong.
No, I
On
think
the,
Lindsay, the reason is you are doing every other week for 1 hour, every other week for
Yeah.
1 and a half hour.
Oh, I got it.
That's
I
why
think.
it causes this kind of confusion, So
yeah, yeah. So this is 1 hour today. It'll be an hour and a half next week, and then an hour the week after that, because I have a regular thing after this meetup on Wednesdays, on every other Wednesday. So anyway, whatever. Okay, so we're on 46, which is our amazement. And I'm enjoying these more and more with every step we take through these. And I'm trying to get a sense as we go along here of some through lines in this particular book. And as I mentioned last week, when we get to the end of book one, we're going to have a session just summarizing our thoughts about what do we think of what Nietzsche is saying, what do we think he's saying, etc. So we'll have a little interlude there. So I thought this was really interesting, and I think that he is proposing that life was actually richer because imagination was more vivid. Science has spoiled a lot of it because science, with its regularity, has revealed that, in fact, the morality of mores isn't so predictable and eternal as we all took it to be back in the old days, depending on the culture you were in. So that's what I think he's up to here. Does anybody have any thoughts, or do you all agree with me? Mark.
Thanks, Lindsay. Where do you get spoiled? Like, where do you see that sentiment?
What is it?
No, where do you see, you said spoiled. You said science is spoiled. So
Yeah,
where do you get that sentiment? Like, where in the text do you find that sentiment?
oh, it's not, that word is not in the text, but
Well, not the word, but the sentiment. Like, what specifically in the text makes you think that he
yeah,
has that sentiment?
I think that he's celebrating the old days as far as being a human is concerned, because it was possible to lose firm ground for once, to float, to err, to be mad. That was part of the paradise and the debauchery of bygone ages as a consequence of the repeatability and the certainty of science. And I think that this is a bit of a lament that that is the case. That's what I meant. The old way of being human is spoiled. because we don't have these flights of imagination anymore. Not like we may have listening to fairy tale. In fact, fairy tales don't mean anything to us anymore. So did that help?
A little bit in that you didn't really refer to the text. You reiterated your own reasoning, which the reasoning sounds very solid. I just don't see it in the text. In the text, I'd like to bring attention again to the italics, which again I assume are Nietzsche's. Our amazement. That's the way he describes this phenomena, amazement. And then the only other two things are stand up in reference to discoveries and how well in reference to results. This does not seem to me like somebody who is regretting science. Now there may be, I understand your interpretation and the reasoning. I just don't see it in the text. That's it. Thank you.
Well, it's not literal. Okay, you don't see, because I'm paraphrasing and sort of restating it in my own words, but those words are not in the text specifically. Audrey.
Well, to me, it's all that, which is interesting because, our amazement is in italics, but that's the title, and that our amazement is somehow missing with things now that we have science. It is a profound and fundamental good fortune that scientific discoveries stand up under examination and furnish the basis again and again for further discoveries. After all, and he goes on. But then later on, he says, indeed, we are so convinced of the uncertainty and fantasies of our judgments and of the eternal change of all human laws and concepts that we are really amazed how well the results of science stand up. Formerly, nothing was known of this fickleness of everything human. This is, to me, Nietzsche being, Nietzsche, and basically saying, think about this. You've lost your mystery. So anyway, formerly, nothing was known of this fickleness of everything human, the mores of morality. And mores is italicized to show that there was something related to it. Sustained the faith that all men's inner life was attached to iron necessity and eternal clamps. Perhaps people then experienced a similarly voluptuous amazement when they listened to fairy tales. The miraculous gave a great deal of pleasure to those who at times grew tired of the rule and of eternity. And he just goes on and on. I mean, so yeah, I mean, you could say that he's these words are somebody that's, to me, being satiric, period. I mean, he starts off saying something like, thank God for this, because now we're certain, and then look at what we lost. That's the way I see it.
Yeah, okay. I would agree with that. I would agree with that. Josh.
Yeah, it also occurred to me that apart from the content of science, that is to say, of its of its factual of what it does in terms of presenting in front of us, laws, is the interest in it. That is to say that there's a shift in interest from such that it in the past it would have been relative to the perspective, which was deeply entangled with eternal moral groundings, and then from which perspective one could then be amazed by fantastical things that one could imagine that would break free of it. That there would have to be kind of a shift of interest and a shift of perspective, such that we now the regularities of science are what become the source of fascination to us. Because I don't know that I don't want to say that Nietzsche believes that science is doing what he's setting up here, as much as that we may think of it in a certain way, that we want to think of it in a certain way, that we set it up so that it even that perhaps without realizing it, that it then amazes us by its regularities and its lawfulness.
Yeah, okay. Thanks for have a satirical observation of that. I think there's some of that here as well. I hardly ever go there. So you're kind of a corrective, Audrey, and I appreciate that. Barbara.
Hi, I can't turn my camera on because my husband's right behind me cooking something. He doesn't want to be, he doesn't want to be.
But we already know he cooks, so let him show
Oh,
us.
no, he's great. But anyway, to Mark, I was going to say, I see your point about the italics, but in my translation anyway, there are also exclamation points. The part that gets to lose firm ground, to float, to err, to be mad, that is also emphasized and valorized in a way. This is what's cool. This is what we want. And he's saying lost it. But what we've lost is the sense that human life has a purpose, like a fate, or like you're either saved or you're not, or there's some determinant. And science has undermined that. I don't know about spoil. Maybe spoil is a strong word, but science has certainly changed that perspective. So now we don't have that stability, and we don't need to be released from it into fairy tales and what does he say? Madness. So now we're amazed at the fact that we actually can know something and things don't change. So maybe spoil is the wrong word, but he's definitely talking about a shift in perspective. And he is indicating that the old way seems pretty good.
I'll take back the word spoiled. What I meant by that sort of was like, if you put, well, never mind. I haven't got a ready example. Jason.
I think he used science discovery as a kind of example for our society, okay, change. So the title is Our Amazement. So through this change, the amazement, okay, so like he said, scientific discovery stand up under examination and furnish the base again and again for further discovery. We have a discovery and then and I think he's talking about every scientific discovery for the to the end, the last part of the text, right? To lose firm ground for once, to float, to air, to be met. I think that's he's talking about. So whenever we have a new discovery, make a progress or something, we lose the ground to be to float, to air, to be met. So I don't think he's talking about satirically. I think he think that's good. Okay, because he said that was part of paradise and the debauchery of bygone age. So that's good. Why? Just like our breeze is like of a man who has suffered shipwreck, climb ashore, stand and now stand with both feet on the firm old ground. Amazement, it does not waver. So every time we have a new discovery, we shake our ground like we are floating, and then we stand up again. So we enjoy that. That's a happiness. And then we shape again, and then we enjoy it. I think that's he's talking about. And that's what I read. Yeah.
Yeah, I would tend to disagree with you that the standing on the suffering shipwreck climbing ashore and realize that the ground does not waver is a very small sense of what is happening rather than to float, to err, to be mad. I think he's contrasting what we're stuck with in terms of the kinds of imaginative flights that we can routinely engage in, like the idea of fairy tales. And it's been replaced by something that's much simpler and not quite as dazzling, even though he does use the word amazement. Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Lindsay. I thank Aubrey for rereading the end. I thought the end was, I didn't pay that much attention to it, and I think it's significant. And also pointing out the explanation points I think are important. I'm going to come to that in a second. The first thing I want to do is reread the beginning. Our dismay. It is a deep and fundamental stroke of misfortune that science discovers things that persist under examination and that furnish the basis again and again for further dogmas. Okay, so there's a different way to describe this. There's a different tone that could be used, and he's not using that. So as far as the explanation parts oh, what is this? This is 41. I just lost. Is this 40? What is? Where are we at?
46, 46.
40.
46.
Yeah, I just scrolled away from it. I'm almost there. Okay, the last part with the actual, I agree, explanation points are also important. So I think this ending part is actually a pretty good or a pretty nice, accurate summation of his attitude. So his attitude towards the former situation, the miraculous did a lot of good to those who at times grew wary of the rule of eternity. So he definitely uses the word good, and I don't think he's using it satirically here. But he's not saying for everybody. He's saying for those who at times grew wary of the rule and of eternity. Okay, I'm not exactly sure what he means by that. I suspect he means social conventions and norms, particularly the religious orthodoxy. I think eternity might be a subtle reference to that. To lose firm ground for once, to float, to err, to be mad. I.e., you don't have to believe the dominant ideological hegemony in society, which would in Europe would be the church for the most part, or the monarchy, because there's no firm basis for any of it. It's like some priests, etc. And he is excited about that. That was part of the paradise and debauchery of former ages. So he's saying something positive and negative about it. Whereas our bliss, modern people in the scientific world, is like that of the shipwrecked man, i.e., that would be the former person before the scientific revolution, the shipwrecked man who has climbed ashore and is standing with both feet on the firm old earth, marveling because it does not bob up and down. So the shipwrecked guy, when he gets to the island, he feels better. At least that's the analogy here. So I do think it is correct that he is saying that something is lost, but I don't think it's a wholesale like denigration or disapproval of science. I would also like to note that the name of the book is not The Dismal Science, The Unfortunate Science, the Forlorn Science. It's The Gay Science. So even the name of the book is attributing or associating, at least, a positive attribute to science. That's it.
That's great.
I think he's actually contemplating a different kind of science, a science that's happy and fun. You have a very different translation than I think a lot of us are using. I don't know which one it is, but the title of 46 in the Kaufman translation is Our Amazement, not Our Dismay. And there's a big difference in those two
Oh,
words.
hang on, Lindsay. Let me. That reading that I did of the first sentence, that was my. That's not what mine says. I was reading into it what I think it would say if he had the anti-science attitude that is being projected, I think, into it by some people. Mine says our amazement it is a deep and fundamental stroke of luck. I'm saying he could say our dismay, it is a deep and fundamental stroke of misfortune. That science discovers things. It could say something like that science determines things that stand up. It could say persist upon examination and that further basis again and again for further discoveries. It could say for further dogma. I'm saying the wording used is not negative. It could be. It could easily be, at least in those first couple. That's so I made that up. That was all my verbiage to show
Okay.
how you could say the same thing using different words and convey a different sense. That's it. Thanks.
Right, right. No, I think it's good of you to point out there. I think that part of maybe what I'm feeling about this is that he is singing the praises of science. But I just feel a sense of lament, and I'm not sure that debauchery is necessarily negative in Nietzsche's mind. Josh.
Yes. Yeah, Lindsay, I agree with you that that Nietzsche is using the word science here in a different kind of a way. I mean, philosophers and certainly philosophers of contemporary to Nietzsche also use the term science in a much broader way than we today might think of it. I wanted to play off of what Jason was saying about. So there is one way you could think of science in terms of sort of, you know, formulating a kind of a paradigm and working within that paradigm and then leaping, in a stroke of madness or whatever from that paradigm to something else. But I would, yeah, I agree that that's not, the metaphor of the shipwrecked, person who now has found himself on this in the stability of of firm ground is not is precisely not thinking of science in those terms. So I think what's important here is the attitude toward it, and that's what's crucial. That's what I think Nietzsche is really painting us. Is he's not making a statement about a factual statement of belief that science reveals for us the true nature of the world as the stable law bound of universe. He's saying that we of a particular era, of Nietzsche's era, in the late 1800s, were really wanted very much. They were thinking of themselves. They were thinking of their predecessors, or of their relationship to their predecessors, in terms of feeling shipwrecked and being, relieved and wanting so badly to escape from that instability, and so I don't have it's difficult for me to access directly where he uses the word dogma in relation to science. Is he using that as part of his description of what science does? Because
No,
that would be key. Oh, go ahead.
I think Mark added his own interpretation and used dogma. It's not in that text, so.
I
Yeah,
thought
I
I
use
saw
the
it.
word dogma as a substitute for discovery, or
Oh, okay. Okay.
or yeah. So I was just saying that there's a lot of word choice made here, and it could be much more negative, but it's not. So I just used that was my one example.
Okay.
Yeah,
Josh.
because he doesn't want it to be negative. He's talking about his contemporaries who are embracing their notion of science. And he's countering that with what previous eras were embracing, and what contrasted with that, right? Um, uh, uh, what are the poles of amazement, and how did they change, and relative to earlier eras?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Barbara.
Yeah, I agree with you, Lindsay, that debauchery is not used in a negative sense here. He pairs it with the word paradise to give it a sort of an edge, like it's a paradoxical and a little,
Yes.
you know, if he's not satirical, he's at least flippant in his language sometimes. But I think he's saying it's good, you know. But the so the way he makes the comparison is either we fly to the heights, or at the end where he says the shipwrecked man climbing ashore, amazed that you know, the earth isn't bobbing up and down like a boat. Well, obviously. So it kind of reminds me of he's saying we have lost something because um, the the person who is standing on firm earth shouldn't expect it to bob up and down. That's the least, you know, you get, but you don't reach the heights. It reminds me of these grammar books that we used to use. They were called The Least You Should Know About Grammar. And I hated them because it's complicated. But here you have the least you should know about what it's like to live life, you know, which is, oh, well, at least the earth isn't collapsing under our feet, you know. So he's contrasting that sort of minimalist sense of like, okay, you know, we have a certain amount of knowledge with this debauchery in paradise.
Yeah, and a lot of these aphorisms, I like paradoxical. When you said paradoxical, I think that a lot of the aphorisms do play around with the notion of things that are paradoxical, or at least seem to have contradictory effects. The good comes with the bad, and even the good and the bad, used not in a non-moral sense, are have to be present for something to be good. There has to be something bad, and he points out a lot of the trade-offs that are made by modern people versus bygone eras. Jason.
Yeah,
Yeah.
let me make another try to make it clear. I find that it's difficult to express what I read. So first, I like to what Josh talk about. It's about attitude. That's what I read. And secondly, I don't think this aphorism is satirical. Okay, he's serious. So only thing I can point out is something, in my opinion, is good or bad, right? So I believe voluptuous amazement is good, and listen to fairy tale is good, and then grow tired of rule and eternity is bad, because you need to listen because you tired of the rule and the eternity, so which is bad. And I believe, okay, just like I think who said it? Barbara said, okay, debauchery is good because, and then debauchery is good, and then I believe he talking about stand with both feet on earth, which is good, okay, because compared to previous suffered and not waver, okay, so standing up is good. So I think it's an attitude, you know, you don't want to be eternal stable. You want to have some shake, just like floating, and then you enjoy when you stand up. So it's a cycle. That's what I read on this one. I hope it's clear. Yeah.
Yeah, no, thanks. You weren't exactly unclear last time, but this time you nailed it. So
Because
thank
I'm not sure one thing I'm still not sure, even listen through all the conversation, I'm still not sure what does he mean about the scientific discovery, which is good or bad, I don't know.
Yeah, well, I think that he's just sort of observing well, he labels it good. It's good fortune in the very first sentence. It is a profound and fundamental good fortune. The consequence, or maybe the downside, is that it has revealed something about the morality of mores that was just they were taken for granted as the way everything will be for all time. And science has revealed that that's not true. these things are subject to other conditions, they change, they're not the same for all societies. And without science, the people within these cultures would continue to have faith that what they believed and observed to be right and wrong, based on custom, was the way all life should be. Fred.
Yeah, we face a number of difficulties here and elsewhere in determining what he says and the value that he places on things. One is that oftentimes, perhaps usually, he's not making a evaluation of things so much as stating the state of affairs, particularly when he says that, for example, when he says formerly we had this or that, but now we, and we means basically him, have this. It might not be that he's saying that formerly things were bad or good, or that we now believe this is good or bad. It's simply he's describing a state of affairs. In other words, his assessments are descriptive rather than evaluative. He's not putting evaluation of good or bad on things so much as he is describing a state of affairs. That's one problem. A second problem, which has been referred to, is it's both interesting and also frustrating that it's just laden with irony. Maybe not this passage, but a number of passages in this in the gay science is ironic. And then the question is, suppose if he says, say that that to lose firm ground for once, exclamation point. It might be that he means it ironically. I don't think he does in this case, but in another number of places he does. When he says that he's amazed by the progress of science, it might be that he means it ironically. I don't think he does here, but it might be. So with every assertion that he makes, you have two considerations. First, is he trying to make a evaluative judgment, or is he simply describing a state of affairs, current or previously in society? And secondly, does he mean it ironically or not? And I really have no idea or guide for the latter. Whether we should assign Nietzsche's to Nietzsche values of good or bad to whatever he says, and also whether it's ironic or not. One can say it's ironic, another can say it's not ironic, and I have no way of determining who is right in each particular situation. So those are the difficulties that I think we seem to face here. I would suggest that in this particular passage, it's much less to do with science than it is with morality. It seems to be an inference that it used to be, given our, well, it has been that science is contrasted with morality here, and that science discovers all sorts of new and wonderful things. We have given in the past, he seems to be saying, a habit of attachment to customary morality, that our inner life was fastened to iron necessity. And perhaps it's a mistaken extension of the positive sciences to ascribe to morality a fixity that we see in the scientific laws. And I think that's kind of what he's suggesting here. So it's neither per se a defense or attack on science and its certitude. Rather, it is a comment on the morality that used to go hand in hand. We used to have a certainty about morality that that apparently we no longer have, according to Nietzsche. Whether for good or bad, I don't know. Whether he's serious or not, I don't know. It's always a puzzlement when you read Nietzsche. Thank
Yeah, and I think it's a puzzle on purpose. I think that we're supposed to take these things not with a grain of salt, but the way we're taking them here and thinking about it and trying to see if an ironic interpretation seems to fit better, if you want to even approach it from that point of view. I think what you said about morality, that was really interesting, and I agree with you, I think, Barbara.
Yeah, Fred posed a couple of interesting questions. One is, does Nietzsche evaluate things? You know, is his stuff, is he trying to create norms or promote opinions? I think he can't get away from evaluating things because of the tone, the style, the language. He's so wedded to the way he says things that he's packing a bias into it that is essentially some kind of opinion, a strong opinion, if not an evaluation. So as you read the way he says it, it's pretty hard to get away from the fact of what he, to get away from the understanding of what he likes and what he doesn't like, and what he endorses and what he doesn't endorse. So he does evaluate things. He just doesn't do it systematically. The other thing is whether this passage is about morality, and that's kind of interesting because that is what he does. He contrasts the idea that an escape from a kind of a strangling set of conventional norms would be paradisical, would be, you know, so enjoyable, so uplifting. But nowadays we don't have that to escape from. So we can't really be uplifted. We're impressed that we walk on the ground and it doesn't just bob up and down like it's not supposed to, you know, so we don't get that thrill that people back in the day got. Of course, everybody's saying that, but it's because they got it because they had a morality to react against. And so he might be implying that science doesn't give us that, and so it doesn't give us enough, maybe.
Yeah, my sense is that the aphorisms generally don't stand alone. That ideas that'll turn up in one place will be re-examined in another place. And so I don't think that we can categorically tell exactly what he's up to unless he states it very specifically. And I think like the intellectual conscience, the second aphorism, or the third, I think it's the second, that is pretty specific, that this is the kind of person that he wants and what he thinks is virtuous. Audrey.
Well, I found everything Fred said made a lot of sense to me on a number of different levels. And there's, I haven't read enough about Nietzsche, of what people thought about him in secondary literature, like before the 60s. I mean, I came upon Nietzsche during college, and, you know, we stuck with that from the 60s till now, sort of different interpretations of him, like he's either really bad and immoral, or he's, you know, very ironic, and there's a lot of nuance there. And nobody wants to see all those complexities. But really, I mean, Fred's right. We really don't know. I mean, and what's interesting is how that would have been, how he was appreciated or not before that, before it became like a big deal to talk about him in college, at least in my college era, the 60s and 70s. So I always think of these aphorisms, I always think of him as, you know, with all these different complexities and, you know, basically doing like passive aggressive kinds of stuff, you know, saying something and meaning something else. But I really don't know, of course. And I find it interesting that I'm looking for I don't see the morality so much with science here, except where in the line, the miraculous gave us a great deal of pleasure to those who sometimes grew tired of. Oh, I have to go. I'm sorry. I'll come back. Somebody else can talk.
Oh, okay. Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Lindsay. I thought Fred made a number of great points. And about the question of irony, yeah, that's always a possibility. I agree with that. I don't really see that in this paragraph, though. And the main reason I think, or to me, the clearest thing is the ending where he uses the analogy and compares the miraculous to the shipwrecked man. So he says that. Oh, I also want to agree that debauchery is probably used with a positive sentiment. I had forgotten about that aspect of Nietzsche's verbiage. I'm not certain about that. I would have to read a little bit more of what he wrote prior to this, but I think that's probably true. So says that was part of the paradise and debauchery of former ages, whereas, whereas our bliss is like that of the shipwrecked man. So if he's saying that if this is just an attack on science and he's saying there's nothing positive about understanding, then he's switching from being serious with paradise and debauchery to separated by a comma, whereas our bliss, to being sarcastic. That's possible, but he's making an analogy here. So I think that's a little bit of a stretch. I think he's comparing two different forms of bliss, whereas our bliss or paradise and debauchery. And I think he's saying they're different and there's consequences to change. But I don't think it's overall. I agree that it's not venerative of science, but I also don't think it's an attack on science per se as well. I think there's a little bit of veneration of science at the beginning, but I don't think that's the really important point for him. I think like the discoveries and the reliability and stuff. I think he's noting that, and there's a little bit of positivity about that. But I think the more important thing is the psychological effects, and that's what I think he's focused on. That's it. Thanks.
Yeah. I think the idea that he's observing a contradictory, a paradoxical situation where and it's hard, good and bad judgments. I take him at his word that it's good in the sense that it produces results and that's a good thing. But he's also observing that there is a loss as a consequence to the human experience. Josh.
Yeah, let me throw this in there. In Nietzsche's era, you okay? Okay. In Nietzsche's era, that culture had just was in the midst of a crisis of belief where they were beginning to reject the notion of God. So that threw up the threat of a nihilism, of a meaninglessness, right? That for centuries, that theological notions, grounded their moral principles as well as their principles of truth, right? So science at that time stepped in to take the place of God. It became, an escape from nihilism, or an attempt to escape nihilism through belief in man, humanity, and through science. And so, you can kind of look at that, the metaphor of the stability of stepping off of the shipwreck, right? The shipwreck was the wreck of the discarded belief in God onto the firm land of empirical science.
Yeah, I think you're anticipating what's going to be coming down the road about 60 aphorisms away.
No, I'm just speaking on the basis of, if I live in that time, I'm surrounded by that nihilism, and when I read about science, I'm going to say, yes, thank God, we have
I-
science, you know,
I
so
would, yeah, I would disagree with you. I think that Nietzsche is not observing the nihilism of his time, but well, whatever. We can do that some other time. I think this is an introductory shot to the bombshell that and preview he's going to drop down the road. This is the first thing to sort of observe that science has its virtues, but it's also has its complications and difficulties. And we're going to do deeper dive into this as we move along. Barbara.
You know, I would say maybe he would say science has its limitations. But you know, this does sort of jibe with at least what I've been experiencing of what we've read. Because to talk about losing firm ground, floating, being mad, this kind of jives in my head with the potential to take risks, the idea of like just chucking everything that the great philosopher, the great man would be able to completely divest of conventional morality. And so I feel an echo of that in this, that he might be saying back in the day, maybe it was easier to have people rise to the top like that because they had so much fixity to react against. And is he saying now that when there's nothing but sort of cut and dried, either the ground bobbles or it doesn't, have we lost not only our imaginative capacity, but have we lost the ability to advance higher philosophically, you know, in terms of our humanity? Do we need something to react against?
Yeah, I would kind of agree with that. I think, well, I wouldn't just kind of, I would agree with that. I think that this, well, I already said it in a lot of ways. It's his attitude towards science is difficult to pin down. In The Birth of Tragedy, there was some controversy toward the end of that about science and the value of science, and there was also some in the uses and abuses of history for life, which we read earlier. There's also the notion that some things can be sciences and other things can't be. But I detect a fairly consistent lament for whatever might produce a lack of passion without judging whether it's good passion, bad passion, just passionate involvement. And I think that's a little bit of what's at play here. I don't know. Well, we're going to quit because we're at the end of the hour, roughly. And I really don't want to spend 2 minutes on 47 because that's about the passions and follows pretty straightforwardly on this one. So we'll sort of keep this conversation in mind and move into the next one. So next week is an hour and a half. I will have it posted within the hour, probably in the next 5 minutes or so, because I've got this down to a science now. So I got it all figured out. And again, thank you guys, even those of you that didn't participate. I hope you had a good time. I hope this is what you were expecting. And if you're here to think and really, really kind of enjoy Nietzsche, I just love Nietzsche's writing and his thinking. And I suppose you guys do too, because that's why you're here. So, okay, so that's a wrap for this week.
Thank
Have a
you.
great week. And I'll see you guys next Wednesday for an hour and a half. Okay?
Thanks,
All right.
Lindsay. Nice
Thank you so
work.
much.
Okay.
I appreciate it.